Well, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Thank you so much for joining us on the Faith Life Podcast at Discovery Fellowship Church. I'm your host, Pastor Nathan, here with my co-host, Pastor Matt.
Hey, guys.
You are back. It's been a little bit of time.
I'm back.
I'm back. So we're trying something a little bit different today. We actually have a producer here with us. Our good friend Tucker is working the cameras today. So as we kind of figure out some of these new things, trying some new camera angles, let us know what you think. You can email podcast@dfchurch.com. Again, that's podcast@dfchurch.com. Let us know what you think of how it looks now, things that you'd like us to adjust, or things that you'd like us to talk about. Now, as we get in, last week we had a really interesting episode with Sam Williams, and I'm excited that we are going to be having other episodes with some of our missionaries here at Discovery Fellowship Church. We're inviting them to come and talk to us and let us know a little bit more about what they do in the mission field. It's going to be a lot of fun, so you can look forward to that. And I don't have this fully worked out yet, but for episode 50, which is in August, we're coming up on it. Episode 50, we are hopefully going to have a very special guest on that episode. So I can't wait to tell you guys more about that, but let's get started on today's stuff.
Awesome.
All right, we're going to jump into the news, and I think the first and the big story I want to talk about, it's actually really kind of sad, but I think it's probably the big one right now, which is they found the remains of that sub that was
the Titan.
on the Titan. And it imploded. So it was, I don't know, something wrong in the design or something went wrong physically on it, but it caused it to catastrophically implode. And I watched an interview with James Cameron, and he, which it's like, well, what does he have to say about this?
Right.
Well, he's been down to the Titanic 33 times.
Wait, seriously?
He has been down to the Titanic 33 times or 32.
Not through this company that
No.
He
does his own whatever.
Wow.
But because like he got really interested in it when he was filming the movie, and they actually filmed a lot of footage there. Whenever you watch the Titanic movie, if you see the part where they are like showing the remains of the Titanic, they really went down there and filmed it.
Okay.
Which is super cool, actually.
Wow.
But he had said that within like 2.5 hours, he knew that it had imploded, because he said there was 2 pieces of data reported. He said they lost on the descent down, they lost communication, but more importantly, their tracking was lost also. Okay. And he said the tracking on a device on subs like this is its own little like battery operated, pressure controlled, fully automatic device.
Right.
And so if that goes offline, it's pretty much something catastrophic has happened.
Yeah.
And so I wonder if a lot of it pretty much people were assuming that that's what had happened pretty quick. Another report that came out said the Navy had heard a sound.
I read that, yeah.
That they reported as, hey, possible implosion in this area.
They picked up on their sonar or whatever.
Right. Okay. And so that was reported right away as well. And so really it's just sad, I think.
It is.
Like I'm watching a lot of people online, and it's also really sad seeing a pretty common take is like, well, it's just a bunch of billionaires, who cares? And I'm like, hey, these are still
Those
people.
are people.
They have families. Yep. Like, regardless of what you think about them, and honestly, the more you read about it, it was like an untested sub, and there was not a lot of regulation around it.
Right.
Like, maybe we should have known better.
And a lot of like warnings from experts in sea vessels saying that these, what did they call these? Submersibles, are not quality. Like they are dangerous to go in. And so,
so
for years, they've been warning this company that what you're creating is not a good product.
And so it's like, okay, I understand that maybe there was some warning signs that were ignored. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's still really sad that these people, they lost their lives, their families lost their lives, and they're going somewhere that's crazy. Like I also read, and I didn't fact check this, so you can feel free to do that less people overall have visited the Titanic that have been to the moon, because it's just such a difficult thing to get down to the bottom of the ocean. Yeah. Like that deep is really, it's easier to go up into space than it is to go down under the ocean.
Is it, I'm trying to remember the number, right? Is it like 12,500 feet below the surface of the water?
I can tell you I think 12,500 feet. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, for perspective, the world's deepest scuba dive was 1,000 feet. And the world's tallest building is 2,700 feet.
Wow.
Like it puts it into perspective. Like I don't think we realize just how deep
the ocean is.
The ocean really is, because it's crazy. So
5 times deeper than the tallest building is tall.
Yeah. So I don't know. That was the news that stuck out to me this week. Just it was on everybody's mind, and we were all, everybody was like, "What's going to happen? Are they going to find it?" There was that knocking sound that they heard, and they're like, "This could be it," but then it ended up clearly not being
right.
it. And so then everybody's like, "Well, then what was that?" And it's like, well, the ocean has a lot of stuff going on. Like it could have been anything. It could have been another boat, and the sound just reverberated through the water. Like there's a lot going on. So. But it's just, I don't know. It's an interesting thing. And I like that people are like trying to do these kind of like expeditious things. Yeah. Like it's cool to say, you know what, we're going to build a sub and we're going to go. Like that part of it is cool. Even if it is unsafe, it's also like climbing Mount Everest was unsafe, but like people want to do it. And like going to the bottom of the ocean is unsafe, but people want to try to do it.
You're trying new things that could lead to some pretty cool discoveries.
Right. So that's, I don't know. I don't know where we leave it. The other thing that I thought was interesting, I was watching the live press conference when they announced that they had found all the pieces, and the amount of times the reporters were asking about like, are you going to be able to bring back the remains? Right. It's like that catastrophic of an implosion. There are probably no remains to bring back.
Right.
Like they were saying that the speed at which it would happen, like they wouldn't have even known it was going to happen. Like it happened so fast, you would not have been able to have the time to comprehend that something had happened. Like if you're imploding that fast, there's nothing left. Unfortunately, it's sad, but they are there. Whatever's left. Well, on that cheery note, I think that's going to take us right into our main point today. And it's the idea that I wanted to talk about today is what is the meaning of life? Now, the joke answer is 42, and that's from a book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But for reals, as a Christian and as a non-Christian, I want to think like, once we're here, what is our purpose? And maybe, thinking about this submarine exploding and like life ending so quickly. What is our purpose? What are we doing here? What is the point of it all? And I was reminded of a song by a Christian artist. His name's Steve Taylor. He wrote a lot of music back in the 80s and 90s. And there was a song he wrote called Jenny. And the antagonistic character of this song, it's kind of like the story about this girl named Jenny. And there's this guy she meets. He's kind of like the quote unquote bad guy of the song. And he tells her, the line from the song is, "These Bible Belt folks think living is a sin, so they all start dying from the day they're born again." And that line always struck out to me. But it's like,
interesting. As
Christians, and unfortunately, as I think we've kind of positioned the gospel in America over the past 50 years with like groups, I don't want to throw any groups under the bus, but like oftentimes when you're evangelizing, there are certain methodologies of evangelism that say the first thing you need to do is, if you die right now, do you know what will happen?
Yeah.
And so much of the gospel has been presented as what happens when you die, that I think that's the only thing that Christians almost start to think matters.
Right.
Right. So it's only going to be about what happens when I die. It's only all that matters. And so when you become a Christian, are you supposed to just kind of sit and wait for that? Like it almost leaves this attitude of like, well, but what about the rest of my life?
Right. Doesn't it, like, if that's your thought, doesn't it lead to this idea of, well, then nothing here that I do outside of that one decision I made to trust Jesus for eternity.
Right.
Nothing else matters. Like that to me seems like a pretty poor existence.
Right. And it's just like you're just sitting here waiting to die, basically. Right. That's what made me think of that Steve Taylor song, right? These Bible Belt folks think living is a sin, so they all start dying from the day they're born again. And that's our reputation. That's the idea that we've put out there, is that our only purpose is to die at this point. Right. So why do we live?
It reminds me of how Ecclesiastes starts, right? Like meaningless, everything is meaningless.
Everything is meaningless.
Okay. I see where that attitude comes from now. If all that matters is once I'm dead, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So is that the answer? Is the answer that as a Christian, the meaning of life is to wait till we die?
No.
Okay. Good.
So if you guys have never heard of Life in 6 Words, it was an acrostic that was put out by Dare to Share Ministries using gospel, GOSPEL. And one of my favorite parts about that, one, it's an easy way to kind of remember some of the key factors of the gospel, but when you get to L, it stands for life. And so it talks about how life with Jesus, like your eternal life, it's not something you wait for until you die, but it starts now. Like the day you say yes to Jesus, you have this new life that begins. So I'm not waiting until I'm dead anymore. Now I have this new life in Christ that starts now and lasts forever. So like it's this, to me, like right away when I think about that and I think about the meaning of life and the purpose, it's not to get to heaven when I die.
Okay.
Right. Like that's a part of like that's like an end goal, right? The end of my earthly current existence in this body, in this form.
Yeah.
The end of it is I get to be with Jesus.
Right.
But
right. We get to be with God.
I'm with him now.
Right.
Slightly differently than
we will be.
End. Yeah.
It makes me think about a little bit of like when we talk about what the gospel is. And when I think about that, I think it's so much more than, again, if we frame it as, well, the gospel is how you get to heaven, I think we're missing so much of the point. Right. And when I look at the entire story of the Bible, and when I look, Genesis to Revelation, and what is the overarching theme, it's the story of God coming to us and God restoring the relationship to us. And it's not us ever getting to him. It's God saying, I'm going to fix things, right?
Yeah.
And we see the end of everything in Revelation. It's not, here's how we got out of the earth to get to heaven, right? It's, here's how God brings heaven back to earth.
Yeah.
That's the picture we see in the end of Revelation is God restoring all of creation. And he says, heaven was descending. The new Jerusalem is descending down to earth, and there's a new heaven and a new earth. And like, this is why the resurrection is so important, because the resurrection of Jesus prefigures the resurrection of you and me and all of creation. And so this like physical embodied eternal existence has some continuity, just like my body will be turned into a new resurrected body when Jesus comes back, right? But there's still a continuity to it. There's not like this disconnect to me now. It's just me.
It's still better. You. Yeah.
The whole earth will be that way, right? And so if our earth that we're on now, it's not something that's just abandoned and destroyed and we go to a different one, but God's redeeming it and there is a continuity from now till then, that should change the way I treat the earth now and the way I treat my life now, because there's going to be a continuity to it.
Right.
And so then that gets into, well, then what is our purpose here? I think when we look at Jesus coming to live, and what did Jesus say? He said, the kingdom of heaven is here. Right. Why did he say that? Why does he constantly preach this message that the kingdom of heaven has come with him?
What's interesting is it makes me realize that this idea of kind of where you started, of waiting until I die to experience that, is not a new thought.
Okay.
Because if Jesus himself, when walking on earth, said, no, the kingdom of heaven is here, like he's brought God's kingdom to earth. Right. And so our joy as Christ followers is we get to do the same thing. Like we have the opportunity to grow and show. Hey, that rhymes. That's a sermon right there. God's kingdom here and now. You don't have to wait until we die to experience that. Right. And so what does God's kingdom on earth now look like?
Right.
That's kind of the question, right?
Right. And so I think you hit it exactly on the head, because I think when we look at the life of Jesus, if we say, well, he taught the kingdom of God was here now, and then he lived a certain way, we as followers of Jesus are saying we want to look more like Jesus every day. So therefore we should try to do the things that he did, and we should care about the kinds of things he cared about. So then it looks like that. Now, this is going to get into a little bit of we talked about this somewhat recently, where it almost seems to intersect with some political and ideological terminology. Right. And I think we need to be so careful with that, because if we avoid it because it has those connotations, we're not doing it justice. Yeah. But if we lean too hard into certain ideologies, we're also missing the point of what Jesus taught. Okay. And so what I'm going to say is, I think that we look at Jesus. Well, he fed people, he helped people, he cared about the poor, he cared about, now this is a loaded term, but he cared about the marginalized. Right. He cared about people who society generally didn't. Yeah. Right. And he showed them love by healing. Now we can't maybe necessarily zap and heal somebody like he did. and by feeding and by meeting their needs. But what he did is he didn't just meet the physical needs, but he didn't just meet the spiritual needs.
Yeah.
And I think the error happens is we try to go one or the other. And so there's like a very popular, you might call it like social gospel movement. And they view the gospel and they view teaching of following Jesus as all we have to do is care about justice and equality or feeding people who are hungry or helping people who are in these tough situations. Yeah. We should be doing all that, but that's not the gospel.
Right.
And now at the same time, the other side of it says, because we've seen that get so politically co-opted, let's just focus on telling them about who God is, telling them that Jesus died for their sins. Let's focus on all the spiritual elements of the gospel. Again, you should be doing all that. All of that stuff is critical. But I think back to James, where he's like, if you're just going to say, hey, God loves you, but not meet the physical needs, you're failing.
Yeah.
Both are true. If we're doing either one of those in a vacuum, we're failing to tell the whole of the gospel.
Right. And Jesus himself told his followers, like, you failed to feed me when I was hungry and clothe me when I was naked. And they're like, well, what do you mean? We never saw you hungry and naked. When you didn't do it to the least of these, right? So whatever you do for others, it's like doing it for Jesus. So he himself not only showed us in action, but with his words said, go and do this. So there has to be that balance. It's not an either or, it's a both and, right?
Right.
And good.
Oh, no, I was going to keep going.
And then I also think of a lot of the miracles that Jesus performed, where oftentimes even before he actually performed the miracle, he did a greater miracle in saying your sins have been forgiven.
Right.
Right. And so there's the spiritual and the physical that Jesus modeled for us every single time. The woman who was caught in adultery, he saved her life by writing in the sand, and everyone slowly started leaving.
Right.
And he who, is without sin cast the first stone. And then he tells her, go and sin no more.
Right.
Right. And so that's that common theme
he addresses
of the physical and the spiritual being met.
So, Matt, why do we miss that so often in the church, do you think? Like, why is that concept? Is it, and I'm as I start to answer the question myself, why do you think we miss it?
Right. I think a lot of it has to do with our flesh, right? I think for a lot of Christians, they have spent their entire lives where like Sunday morning church service was the end goal.
Right.
I go there every week. I feel better about myself. I give my tithe and I move on with my life.
The point of church is to have a perfect Sunday morning, 1 hour, and then do the rest.
Yeah. I don't have to get my hands dirty. Someone else can do that. I can go to a church that supports a bunch of missionaries and know that my tithe is going to help others get their hands dirty, but I don't have to do it myself.
Yeah.
And so there's this cultural, like, comfortable Christianity that we've kind of fallen into this trap of. And it's easy for us to say, oh, well, that person, that's too risky. I'm just going to stay over here in my comfortable zone, continue to read the Bible and worship together. But honestly, I show what I worship by how I spend my time.
Right.
And so if my time is just my once a week Sunday morning action, and then I go back to my own comfort and pleasures, well, I'm worshiping my own comfort and pleasures.
Right.
Rather than worshiping God and doing the things that he's called me to.
Right.
On the other end, I think you have I can just help someone else. I can feed them. I can, provide for the marginalized. And then again, I feel better about myself and feel like, okay, I've done this for God.
Right.
When really I've done it for me to feel. So like we have both extremes, both being wrong. And so we need to find that balance, which is really the model that Christ gave us in Scripture of the both and.
I think that the other thing that stands out when I think about this topic, and I kind of already alluded to this a little bit, but I think another problem that can arise when we talk about why we struggle with this so much is, again, that over conflation with politics.
Right.
Because I know there's a lot of people who will say politically, the government should not be responsible for, welfare or things like that, right? And so then there's a side that will say politically that's the government's job. And so now it becomes this thing where the other side is pushing caring for the poor as a governmental action. And so now me on the conservative side would say, well, that's not the government's job. Now, if I talk about that all, I sound like I'm on that side, and I can't be identified with that political side, heaven forbid. And so we've conflated the two so much that we can't even talk about helping people who are poor, or we can't even, and because again, so much is like on one side, you've got, so much about like identity wrapped up into like, well, I am this marginalized person and that's my identity. And so now if I talk about how do we help people who are marginalized, quote unquote, now I'm politically painted into another side. And so I don't even want to talk about it because of the implications now. And it's like, how can we move past this over-connected church and politics thing?
Right.
So that we can say as a church, I want to help people in my community, but it's not making a political appointment. It's a point. It's just trying to follow what Jesus said to do.
Right. So I feel like we can go down a bunch of rabbit holes here. And so maybe kind of redirecting this back to your first question of like, what is the purpose or meaning of life? Right.
Yeah.
And so we went on this long trail of like why we're failing to figure that out, but getting back to it, again, biblically, you see the model of growing spiritually by doing, not just hearing, right? James again.
Right, back to James.
And so Jesus himself said, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full.
Right.
Not I have come that they may have life after they die.
Right.
Right? And so that full life means I'm gathering together on a Sunday morning or whatever it might be for corporate worship and fellowship with other followers of Jesus, where we can encourage, spur one another on towards love and good deeds.
Right.
And I'm going and being the hands and feet of Jesus on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Right. So like the purpose of life isn't for me to accumulate as much as I can, as quick as I can, and be as comfortable as I can.
Okay.
I don't see that biblically anywhere.
No.
I just came back from Texas, where you have a lot of those mega churches that are preaching the prosperity gospel, right? Yeah. And so you have a lot of, I think, comfortable Christians in that state. It's a huge state, by the way.
It is a huge state.
It takes like 48 hours to drive across it. At least that's what it felt like.
That's probably accurate.
And so like that's not the meaning or purpose that is laid out for us biblically. So I think they're getting it wrong. Not Texans, those mega church pastors that are preaching the prosperity gospel. Okay. And really for them, it's all about growing their personal platform and their multi-million-dollar comfort that they have, right? So that can't be it. That's not the full life I think Jesus was talking about when he said, you may have life and have it to the full. I think it's full spiritually, emotionally, relationally, because those are all things that we are wired for by God in his design, his perfect design and creation. Right. And so we have to look at all those things, all those purposes that he lays out for us, and find ourselves pursuing all of them. Okay. Not just picking and choosing what makes me feel good in the moment.
How do we change ourselves so that here's all the things I know I'm supposed to be doing, and here's all the purposes, and I know I'm supposed to be the hands and feet. I know I'm supposed to go through my day and my life and all that. But how do I, like, practically, what does that look like? How do I change? How do we change?
So it's funny because this is kind of now like a Christian growth type of episode now. Yeah. Like, what are some of the key things? Well, you read the Bible, you pray, you worship, you fellowship, you do all those things, right? None of those are wrong. Do all of those. Those are all very important.
They are.
They are like the cliche Christianese answer where, you just got to read the Bible and pray more.
Yeah.
And that's true. But I think part of what we miss out on a lot, I think, is the relational aspect of how God designed us.
Okay.
A lot of us, we try to live our Christian lives. We try to live our lives, whether you're a Christian or not, in isolation. And we've seen that a lot over these last several years, where now like depression rates are skyrocketing because all of a sudden I experienced some isolation and I've just kind of stayed in that isolation. Yeah. Right. I can do this on my own. I can figure it out on my own. I don't need you. Or we have this fear of, if I open up my life to someone else, then I'm going to experience a lot of hurt because I'm going to get judged. They're no longer going to want to be friends with me. I'm going to be kicked out of the church if I tell someone that I sinned once, right? Like there's all this stuff when God has designed us for and modeled that in Jesus
Yeah.
for relationship. Jesus didn't have this isolated solo ministry. Jesus had his closest followers that they did everything together, right? They learned, they grew, they ate, they taught, they performed miracles, all these things they did together. Now, you have to have your quality alone time because it's your relationship with God.
Well,
Jesus modeled that as well.
I was going to say, Jesus did the same. Yeah.
I'm going to go off and pray. Right. Stay here while I go do that because this is my time to connect with the Father. We need all that. But I think we neglect the relational side so much that my growth is hindered because in my head, I think I can do it all on my own.
Right.
And you can't do it on your own. Like, I don't know who needs to hear this, but you can't do it on your own. I know we all try to.
Yeah.
But
I think there's something maybe ironic about this idea that we are the most connected as a society than we've probably ever been in the history of humanity. Like, due to cell phones, text messaging, internet, social media, all that, we are connected more than we've ever been. So to say that we are now more isolated than ever as well, it's ironic, but
it's because now I can just hide behind this thing and feel like I have relationship through it. But this isn't relationship, right? This is, I'll
say this. I'd say it's an aspect of relationship, but it can't be all of it.
Okay.
Right. And so, and I deal with this. I mean, we're kind of bouncing all over the place with this topic today, but I love it.
It's what happens when I go a few weeks without being on the podcast.
We got a lot to catch up on. So one of the things that if you don't know me personally, or you're not connected at Discovery, I'm the pastor of online ministry here. And I get this question a lot is like, is online a replacement for in person? It's kind of like what you're talking about as well. And so I spend a lot of time explaining how online is not the replacement for contact, but it goes in addition with it. And so I view it, it's like, if you're married, do you ever text message your wife? Yeah, you do. That's not the only way you communicate, but that's a part of the way you communicate. And so online is the same thing as well. Like, it gives us these ways to connect. They just can't be the only ways we connect.
Yeah.
But I think, again, people try to go to an either or with it. It's like we live stream our church service every week. Is that a replacement for in-person meeting with other Christians and building each other? No. But for some people, that is the way that they are able to connect. And so that's how they connect. Yep. And what I try to at least communicate is that should be one piece of it for you if you are watching online. But I encourage you, invite other people into your house, invite people over. Like, we have some people who are older and unable to get out, but they're in like a retirement community. And they actually have other people from there come in and they watch the service together. And it gives them both. It gives them the connection to the teaching and the building up, but it also gives them that in-person, one-on-one like time. And so it's the same for anybody. Like, use the digital options, use the online connections, but don't neglect the in-person stuff as well.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So what is the meaning of life? So Ecclesiastes, it's all meaningless. It's worthless. It's pointless, right?
Okay.
But he ends in Ecclesiastes 12. He says the end of the matter.
I say, always get to the end, because if you don't, you're missing the whole point.
Right. If you just read the first few chapters of Ecclesiastes, it's going to be a sad day for you. But if we keep going, the end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Okay. And then Jesus himself says, basically to summarize everything, the whole purpose of it all.
Yep.
Everything you've heard, you've been taught, you've learned, everything in the Torah. Here it is. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself.
Right.
So like, all that requires action now.
Yeah.
It doesn't require me sitting and waiting until I die.
Right.
In fact, if I sit and wait until I die, I've actually missed that opportunity to love God and love people.
Right. That's true. And you don't really have any practical loving of people if you're isolated and reclusive and you haven't done anything. And so that's it. So it's go out, figure out what your community needs. And my encouragement then is, don't worry about any other the connotations that might go along with that. Like, people need help, then help people. Yeah. Right. Find people who need help. Find a way. If you're here, if you're plugged into Discovery, like, volunteer with us because we've got places for you to serve the community.
Right.
And it's not because it's just like, oh, you get to work, but it's like, this is a practical chance to be the arms and feet, right? Like we have a food pantry every month that serves a ton of people in our surrounding area. And it's great to be able to actually help. And then if you've found our podcast somehow and you're listening, it's like, find out who in your community needs help. Find out what are the ways that you can actually look different and meet people's needs. I think it's cool.
And you don't have to like reinvent the wheel.
Right.
So like, don't feel like if you're in a community and you're not currently plugged into a local church that, oh man, this is a daunting task. I have to figure out how I can help all the people. Find a local church that's already doing stuff and get engaged and plugged in there. We're not on this podcast to just promote Discovery Fellowship.
Right.
I mean, we're both pastors here, but wherever you are, wherever you're listening from, find a local church because it's part of how God designed us to do this in community. And so find that local community of believers where you can like live out God's purposes in your life together.
And that's we've talked about this in the past, and it's going to be an upcoming podcast, hopefully, where when we talk about the church, we're not talking about Discovery, right? We're talking about like all of the people who belong to Jesus and then meet in these local groups. We're not in competition with any of them.
No.
Like we don't want to say, come here instead of there. Like go where God has planted you.
We're all in this
together.
I'm sorry,
guys.
guys.
High School Musical is great.
I just distracted you with High School Musical.
You did.
I apologize.
What I thought of was a couple weeks ago, we were coming back from Elitch's on a youth group trip. Elitch's is a local amusement park near us. And on the ride back, they ended up just doing Disney sing-along. And I think we hit High School Musical, and none of them really knew what it was. And it was a teaching moment of, here's the glory that is High School Musical.
I have never seen any of the High School Musicals. I just know that song.
You've never seen any of them? Oh, my goodness. All right, I know what we're doing next time.
Nope. I can live react to that.
You can live react to High School Musical. All right. Well, as we bring this topic to a close then, and we start to say, love God, love people. That's
a good
now,
summary.
A lot of people sometimes summarize, like, they almost put the Gospels at. That's not the Gospel. The Gospel's bigger and better, and there's all that. But that is kind of how to live.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. What to do with your life. Find out how to love God, love people.
And there's a lot in both of those.
Yeah.
So like it sounds super simple, but it covers a lot of stuff. And so don't just hear that and be like, oh, that's easy enough. As long as I'm not a hate-filled person, I'm good to go. No. There's a lot that we need to dive into, but not today. Not today, because today we're going to move on to my favorite section, Ask the AI Anything. I don't know if that's what we're calling it, but that sounds like a good name as any. Now, last week proved to be a little bit controversial. Matt, I don't know if you had a chance to listen to it with all your traveling. I have not yet.
This was a listener suggested prompt. And it was, what are the 10 most unhelpful Bible stories?
Oh my.
Which is a little controversial. And you know what we ended up doing as we talked through them, pretty much we went into why every single one of them actually matters a lot.
That's good.
And there's nothing, but when we're all honest with ourselves, like the number one was like the genealogies in Matthew. It's like, there's a lot of value to them.
Right.
We know there's a lot of value. But sometimes sitting down and reading them is not going to be...
And in the immediate, like as
moment.
A new believer trying to figure some stuff out, that might be something that I will wait to do my deep dive study on, but get to eventually.
Right.
Because everything,
and we clarified and we caveated that obviously everything in the Bible is important.
Caviar.
It is... I've never actually had caviar.
Oh, okay.
The Bible is the inspired, inerrant word of God. That is what we believe. That is what we teach. So again, if you heard that and you were like, oh no, they don't love the Bible. It's like, no. But we wanted to talk about, and actually a lot of the things on the list were pretty actually interesting. So it wasn't the greatest list. We're going to go the other way this week though. But before we do that, as always, if you would like to sponsor the ChatGPT segment, please email podcast@dfchurch.com for just the price of a coffee every hour. I'm just kidding. It's not that expensive. It's not that expensive.
Oh my.
But it's like for $20, you too can sponsor this. You can get your prompts read and we can see what ChatGPT 4 is all about. However, today we're kind of going the other direction. We're saying, what are the 10 best Bible verses to memorize?
Oh, okay.
Okay. So I thought, you know what might be a little bit of fun? I'll read the reference and we'll see if you have it memorized. And if
man,
you
you're gonna put me on the spot.
I'm putting you on the spot, Matt. I'm sorry. If you have it memorized, then it was a good verse because then it did it. This is a good list because
so just turn it so I
turn
can't
it
see
so you can't see it.
I have what I call COVID brain.
Oh yeah,
where the last several years, my memory is
just
terrible.
I know.
It's
the worst.
Like if you were to ask my wife, she would agree because she tells me something. It's like, we just talked about this. I'm like, no, we didn't. No, we literally just talked about it. I'm like, ugh, I'm sorry. So I apologize in advance if I have failed any of you with my recollection. But
here we go. Number 10.
Okay.
Ephesians 2, 8, and 9.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, for it's by grace you've been saved through faith, not of yourselves as a gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. But verse 10 is
super good too.
Super helpful. For we're God's workmanship created in Christ to do good works which he prepared in advance for you to do.
All right. So
always go to verse 10. Don't stop at verse 9.
Always go to verse 10. And actually, always go to all the context because context really matters. Yeah. And sometimes the biggest problems, as we're going to see in a minute here, are when we pull these verses completely out of any context and just use them as their own little nuggets of love.
Yes.
I don't know why I called it that, but
wow.
hey.
Okay.
Also, a postscript on this. It says, these verses cover a range of themes such as love, trust, guidance, strength, and salvation. However, it's important to note that different individuals may have their own personal favorites or find other verses more impactful based on their own spiritual journey.
Fair.
Okay. Number 9, Jeremiah 29:11.
That's the for that I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Guess what? Context matters.
One of the most misused verses in the Bible, but that's okay.
Yep.
But hey, you knew it.
Yeah.
So good.
That's because I misuse it all the
time. Number 8, Romans 12:2.
Romans 12:2. Do not be conformed any longer to the patterns of this world.
Yep.
But be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
That by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Man. All right. Psalm 119.
My heart's beating, you guys. This is like a test.
Number 7.
I did not study for.
Psalm 119:105.
Or I've been studying my whole life for this test.
Your whole life has come to this moment.
Right. Oh, man. Psalm 119:105.
Psalm 119 is so long. This is the 105th verse. You're going to be like, well, which part is the one that they're talking about here?
Okay. So, can I get like, this is like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire where I get 50-50 or whatever. Can I get like a couple words?
Let me give you a hint.
Oh, okay.
There is a very cheesy, maybe 90s, I want to say like Amy Grant song of this verse that uses the King James version of it specifically. Does that help?
Amy Grant.
Is it Amy Grant? Maybe. If I start singing it, that'll probably be way too much of a hint. But
sing some of it. I want to hear you sing.
It's going to start with thy.
Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path.
That's the one.
Yeah, thy is a great word. So, I think you could have avoided Amy Grant.
But is that an Amy Grant song?
Thy word is a lamp unto my feet.
Yeah. Isn't that Amy Grant?
I have no idea. We sang that in church, though,
when I
was a kid. Yeah.
So did we. All right. Here's another one that is often misused. Philippians 4:13.
I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength.
That is it.
Including like jumping off a bridge and driving 90 miles an hour in a residential zone.
I can do all things. Squares.
Yeah. You should not do any of those things. Context matters.
Matthew 6:33, number 5.
Matthew 6:33, 6. So we're going, this is like midway through the Sermon on the Mount.
Yep. This is another one that was a
the
song.
Kingdom of
you got it.
God.
Man, you are 5 for 5 right now. Now, who sang that? Did you sing that one in your church?
First, the kingdom of heaven.
I don't know that one.
That's the one I sang. Which one did you sing?
Seek ye first the kingdom of God.
I went a little more poppy with mine.
Righteousness.
Yeah.
Is that a hymn or is that just a cheesy 90s song? That would be a fun game too. Hymn or cheesy 90s song.
Next week on Ask the AI.
Okay. 4, Romans 8:28.
Romans 8:28. Well, hang on. No. I know this one. Why am I blanking? Oh my goodness.
This one you will know.
I know. Hang on. I know Tucker, our producer in the room right now, just raised his hand because he and I feel like Tucker, you and I have talked about this one quite a bit.
This is another one that can often be misinterpreted.
Right. Give me a word.
And we know.
Oh my goodness. Why did it take me so long? That he works all things together for the good of those who love him and been called according to his purposes.
Yes. Romans 8:28.
What we miss on that one is we kind of stop at he works all things together for good.
Right.
That's kind of like how it's misused.
On my favorite TV show, Scrubs, shout out Zach Braff and Donald Faison. I'll tag you in the podcast. I probably won't. But there's a character who is the Christian character, and she quotes this verse, God works all things for good, and stops it there. And that's like the crux of the episode is like bad things happen.
Yep.
And she's always saying, well, something good comes from it. And they're like, no, that's wrong.
Yep. I actually really struggled with, there was a song, Chris Quilala of,
Chris Quilala.
What group? Kim Walker-Smith.
Bethel? Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. The bridge, you make all things work together for my good. That one.
Things work together for my good.
I struggled the first several times I heard that song with the bridge because I'm like, are they taking it out of context?
Yeah.
Like, are you taking Romans? So the first several times I led that with the youth group I was a part of at the time, I talked about the context of Romans 8:28 and the bigger picture of like, not the good that you want, per se, not what you think is best for you, but ultimately his good and his glory for those who love him and called according, your good through his glory. Yeah.
All right. Can you nail this perfect landing? Psalm 23:1.
Psalm 23 is the shepherd one.
Yep. So how does it start?
So verse 1, it's not even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, right? Because that's later on in Psalm 23. So it starts with
you're already almost there.
Oh my goodness.
With what you said.
Right, I know. It's got like the word sheep or shepherd in it.
Yep. Oh, that's a
I know. There's also a song.
Is it? I don't know the song of this one. You're gonna kick yourself if I tell you.
Yes, I don't want you to tell me yet. All right, first word.
The.
Yeah. The Lord is my shepherd.
Yep. And then there's
the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want.
There's the whole verse. Yeah. Yep. Close one there, Matt. Close one. All right. Number 2, Proverbs 3:5-6.
Proverbs 3, 5, and 6.
This is if you don't just know it, it's gonna be tough.
I know. No, this is the Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. I know this one. This is an Awana verse. So I did Awana as a kid.
Yep. And a lot of these are
Awana verses.
It does a good job.
All right, first word.
Trust.
Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight.
Yes.
Yep.
Wow.
See, here's the tricky part. And what I often do when I'm like helping people in Awana is I'm less about like having every word perfect.
Right.
And even like having the reference associated.
Right. If you've got
if you understand what the Bible is saying and you
agree.
know it came from God's word, we can work on the rest. And so that's why I like getting the reference, giving me a first word. I'm like, oh, I know the verse that's associated with that word, right? Man,
then you got one left.
I have one left.
One left. Can you guess what it is?
It is John 3:16.
It is John 3:16.
For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son, whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life.
You had one right that you knew. Like, not you had all of them right, really. I had to give you a couple of hints, but you got
a couple like
right.
one words. Yep. Give me one words.
So I thought that was pretty fun. That is fun. That was a good.
Those are kind of like big.
Those are like the ones to memorize. All right.
I'm surprised you didn't have like a Romans 3:23.
Right.
For all of sin and fall short of the glory of God, or even 6:23, wages of sin is death. So some of the key like Romans Road Gospel presentation ones.
Sure. Yeah, I would expect maybe more of those next time.
Genesis 1:1, I might have expected.
In the big inning.
In the big inning.
It's baseball.
Yep. But that was fun.
Well, let's move real quick as we close it out to our listener mail. Again, if you want to be a part of the show, email podcast@dfchurch.com. That's podcast@dfchurch.com to write in, just like this listener did, or viewer now that we're video. And he says this: as we read through the Bible this year, shameless plug to join the reading plan, which is fun. We are doing a church-wide reading plan. Yep. I'm way behind on it, though.
Yeah, but shameless plug. If you want to email podcast@dayofchurch.com, we'll send you the link, and you can join us halfway. You don't have to try and catch up. Just start from where we are.
And he says, we come to Song of Songs. We read that Solomon called his bride his sister, and the bride calls Solomon her brother. How do we reconcile this with God's commandment of not marrying your siblings? If this was a way to talk openly with your family, but not your betrothed, I can't imagine telling my sister the thing that Solomon said to his bride. I could not. No. So, Matt, what do you think about this? Is Solomon just from Alabama, not Israel?
Oh, my goodness. I apologize if anyone is watching or listening from Alabama. Okay,
that is just a generic stereotype of the South. But I have a lot of relatives in Kentucky, and we do say that our family tree was a wreath. So I'm allowed to.
Then you should have said Kentucky, not Alabama.
I should have said, sorry, Kentucky. Well, but if that's what Kentucky is, Alabama.
Yeah, I don't think he is talking ancestrally here.
No,
but maybe we can do a whole podcast about these types of
Well, in one sentence,
tough translation.
What's he saying? Why does he say brother and sister? Why do they say brother and sister then?
I'm gonna have to. I don't think I can one sentence it because I'd want to look it up in the original language first.
Yeah, I think
and see what that word means. But
I would lean that it's probably more just term of endearment.
A term of endearment.
Like if I were like, "What's up, my brother?"
Right.
Like I'm not meaning literal brother. It's just a term of closeness.
Well, and my kids call both me and their mother bruh. So yeah, it's definitely a term of endearment.
I think the quick version is, I think it's more a term of endearment as opposed to an open endorsement of incest.
Yes. That is a good, quick, easy answer.
Well, that's all we have for you today. But again, please email us, podcast@dfchurch.com. We would love to hear from you. And with that, we will see you next week.
Bye, guys.